Hey everybody, how's it going? Connor here today at etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at the Blue Ox base plate kit here for our 2012 GMC Terrain. So this is what our base plate is going to look like while it's installed on our vehicle here. As you can see, most of everything is sort of going to be behind the scenes here. Behind our bumper fascia, the only thing we're going to be able to see really sticking out is our connection points for our safety chains, as well as the rods which hold our electrical connector to the base plate kit. So what I really like about this Blue Ox base plate kit here in particular is the removable arm design. And essentially what this means is you can see these silver lugs here on either side which connect to our tow bar. These are actually removable because this base plate kit has a removable arm design. So basically, when we're not towing our vehicle behind our motorhome, we can remove these arms here for a very finished, clean install look. We won't really even be able to tell there's a base plate kit installed. All we need to do to install and remove these, we have a spring-loaded pin here on the side that we're going to pull, and then we can rotate up and out. So as you can see, this is what it's going to look like when we're driving around town. You can just barely see the outer shell here for the base plate kit. And then when we are ready to tow our vehicle again, it's super simple to reinstall these. We're simply just going to insert them in like so, and then we're going to twist until it catches the lock. It depresses the spring-loaded pin, and then we can rotate it to either side to lock it in place. So directly beside the arms on our base plate kit, we're going to have these welded on safety chain tabs. These are going to be nice and accessible. They're going to take our S-type hook or even the Clevis type hook safety cables. So we'll be able to slip those on there just like so and secure them into place a little bit differently depending on which ones you have. As you can see there, they're going to be free. We're not going to have to worry about them banging on the vehicle here because they're nice and extended away from the front bumper fascia. So something else that Blue Ox does that I really like is you can see these two tabs here on either side, which are used to house our electrical connector. So these are actually welded directly to the cross beam on the base plate kit here, and they give us a nice, easy, accessible location for our trailer connector here. So again, we don't have to worry about anything banging on the vehicle here. It's nice and extended away from the front bumper fascia. So in regards to installation, this is definitely going to be something you can do at home by yourself. Now we do have to take the front bumper fascia off. However, it's not going to be nearly as hard as it may sound. In regards to modifications to the vehicle, we do have to drill a few holes, but again, it's not really a big deal. It's going to be how our base plate attaches to the frame, so it gives it a nice and secure connection point. So I do recommend that you guys try this one at home by yourself if you have some tools and moderate install experience. So please keep in mind, a complete flat tow setup is going to consist of several components. We're going to have the base plates, which gets installed on the towed vehicle, the tow bar, which attaches from the base plates to our motorhome. We have our safety cables here, sort of is a last line of defense should there something happen to our tow bar. We have our electrical connector here and the diode lights installed on the towed vehicle that'll allow you to transfer the signals from the motorhome to the dinghy vehicle. And then last but not least, we have our supplemental braking system, which is going to be required in most states, and that's going to apply the brakes on our towed vehicle to help us slow down. So in some cases, depending on our motorhome, we may need an additional component such as a high-low adapter, which you can see here. And basically what that does is it sort of helps balance the connection point from our trailer hitch to the connection point for our base plates on our towed vehicle here. It helps our tow bar stay a little bit more level and perform better. So now that we've gone over some of the features and benefits, let's go ahead and jump right into installation and show you how it's done. So the first step of our installation here, we need to go ahead and pop the hood on our vehicle because we're going to be exposing this threshold panel here, because this is actually part of what connects our bumper fascia to the vehicle. And since we're going to be removing the bumper, we need to go ahead and remove these fasteners up here. Now to start with, we're going to have two torque screws here. There's going to be two on either side. We're going to take a T20 Torx bit. We're going to remove both of these here on both sides. And once these two are out, we're going to have two more fasteners here on this side. They're going to be push fasteners here. We're going to see both of these at the top. In order to get these out, we can use a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver. And basically there's going to be a little divot that we could see in there. We're basically just going to get a tool head in that little divot there, because we're actually going to be popping the center section up. Once we do that, the fastener should come out. So once we get this last one off over here, we'll have these same fasteners there on the other side of the vehicle. We need to remove those as well. So now we're going to come into the inside of our wheel well here. We're going to need to do this on both sides, so it doesn't matter which one we start with. But we're going to have 4 fasteners in total we need to remove. 2 Torx screws here, which we'll take out using a T20 Torx bit, and 2 push pin fasteners, one here and one down here, the same combination of fasteners we just removed under the hood. So once we get all those fasteners out, as you can see here, we've pretty much cleared our fender liner from our front bumper fascia here. So we'll go ahead and just repeat this process on the other side. So now we're going to come to the bottom edge of our front bumper fascia here, and on each side we're going to have these 2 screws here, which we'll remove using a 7mm socket. So now we have all of the fasteners off that are attaching our front bumper fascia to the vehicle here, so we can go ahead and pull the fascia off now. Now we're going to want to start on either side here, right to where our bumper meets the quarter panel. So we're just going to dig our fingers here, get behind this fender well liner here, and then we're just going to pull out to release the clips. We'll just work our way to the front of the vehicle here. So we had some trouble with the clip right in here, right where our headlight is. So what we need to do is we actually need to pry this outward a little bit. So we're going to be taking a trim panel tool here, being very careful that we don't actually damage the bumper fascia. And basically, we just want to pop it out. We heard it click there to release. So now that we have all the clips released, we can go ahead and remove the fascia from the vehicle. Keep in mind, if we have fog lights, we're going to have some electrical connectors we need to disconnect first. So in order to get this connector loose here, we're going to have 2 of these little tabs here on either side. We're going to take a flathead screwdriver, and we're just going to pry those out here just a little bit. And we should be able to pull down and away on our connector to release them. Just like that. We're going to have one more on the other side. So now that we have our fascia off, we can go ahead and find a safe place to set it aside. So now if we come inside to the passenger side here, directly behind our bumper fascia here, we're going to see this little baffling here. We're going to have 2 nuts here, one on this top here, one on the inside here. We're going to take a 10mm socket. We're going to remove both of those nuts so we can remove this baffling. Once we have both of those nuts removed, we should just be able to remove this. So now on either side here, we need to come to this little support piece that's hanging directly down from our bumper beam here. So we actually need to go ahead and cut out a little triangle shaped notch here. Now for the top, we're just going to follow this line here from our bumper beam. We're going to come in till about the back of our frame here. So we see the frame here, we'll just make a line with our finger. We're going to come to about there, which is going to be about right like that. So now we're just going to go ahead and draw the rest of our section here that we need to cut. It's going to look about like that. That's the piece we're going to trim out. So we're going to do this on both sides. We're going to trim this using a reciprocating saw. Now we'll grab a pair of pliers here. Just go ahead and bend that piece of metal off. And we can go ahead and repeat this process on the other side. So So the next thing we need to do is we need to come here to this front bumper beam here. As you can see here, we sort of have this flange on the bottom here. Now what our instructions say to do is they say to go ahead and bend this out to a 90-degree angle. So we're going to take a pair of vice grips here. We're just going to slowly sort of work this contour here more outward towards the front of the vehicle. And keep in mind, we're going to be doing this on both sides. So now we're going to come on the passenger side here, directly below our bumper beam. We're going to see a small temperature sensor here connected to this black housing. We're going to take a trim panel tool here. We're just going to go ahead and pry up that temperature sensor and remove it from the black housing. Just like that. So now we're going to come back to the same temperature sensor little housing here. We actually need to go ahead and trim this. Our instructions say to measure approximately 5/8 inches high by a 1/2 inch deep. So we're just going to go ahead and roughly mark out where we're going to be trimming. It doesn't really need to be exact, and it's going to be hard to be exact because you can't really fit your tape measure back there. So just sort of eyeball it as best we can to trim that out. So we're just going to take a smaller reciprocating saw here. We're just going to do our best to make this cut here. If you have a small Dremel tool, we could use that. Or if you really just had like a small handsaw, that would probably be ideal for this. So the next step of our installation would be to go ahead and take the base plate and set it on our vehicle here. As you can see, we've already done that now. The instructions are going to call for using some clamps. We didn't really find that to be the best method. Really, if you have 2 floor jacks as such, there actually should be a scissor jack in the vehicle you could use as well. But we're going to need 2 of them. That's going to allow us to adjust each side individually. We're going to be able to get the correct fit on the vehicle. Because it is a little tricky moving it back and forth, we do need to hit a certain measurement. There's nothing we can really use to hold it in place besides these jacks. So we just went ahead and took 2 floor jacks here. We have some spacers, so we could pin the base plate up on the vehicle. And now we'll show you next the position it needs to be in before we start drilling. So now we want to come to the outside of our base plate here where it butts up against the frame. We want to check this on both sides, but we're going to be looking for 2 things. Number 1 here, you can see the edge of our base plate is going to be flush to the back of this channel on our frame here. So that's the first thing we need to check for. And the second thing we need to check for is the distance from the top of our base plate tab to the bottom of the frame here. So we're looking for 1 1/8 inch, which you can see we're on there perfectly now. So we need this to match on both sides. We need to have the same distance, and it needs to be flush to this flange here. Now, the good thing about the floor jacks is if you're not quite there, if you're a little bit too high or a little bit too low, you can just easily adjust the floor jack to get you where you need to be. And also, another little precautionary thing we need to check here is if we look through this bottom hole here, you're probably not going to be able to see it on camera here, but we want to shine a light through this bottom hole here and just make sure that we have full metal contact with our frame. When we were doing this earlier, we did have to adjust it a little bit further because if we look through this hole here, we could see the bottom edge of the weld here on our frame. So basically, we want the hole to be up fully enclosed in the metal surface. So that's just another thing you want to check for. But once we get both sides squared away, we can go ahead and start drilling. So now we're going to take a 13 32 inch drill bit. We're going to drill this bottom hole on each side of the vehicle here. Now if you do have some clamps, it'd be a good idea to go ahead and attach them now to make sure it doesn't move. But as long as we have the jacks nice and sturdy, we shouldn't have to worry about it shifting. So now that we have our hole drilled through, we want to take our 3/8 inch, 1 1/2 inch long hex bolt with our kit here. We're going to take some Loctite. We're going to apply a little bit to the end of our threads here. So now we'll take our bolt here, slide it through the hole, and then we'll take our nylock nut here and just loosely secure it on the other side for now. Then we'll go ahead and repeat this same process on the other side, and then we'll come back and tighten these 2 bolts down. So we went ahead and rechecked our measurements here with both of our bolts in place. And since we're good on both sides, we can go ahead and take a 14mm socket and wrench, and we're just going to snug up both of these bolts, and then we can torque them to spec. So this inside one's going to be a little bit tricky to get your wrench on. Now that we have it snug down, we can come back here with our torque wrench and torque it down to the specifications in our manual. Keep in mind, we want to repeat this process on both sides. So now that we have one of our bolts in, we can go ahead and drill out these remaining 3 holes here on each side. So now that we have our holes drilled, 3 more on each side, we're going to take our 2/8 inch long 3/8 inch hex bolt. We're going to place one of the lock washers on there, follow that up with a flat washer. And then with all our fasteners, we're going to take some red Loctite here. We're going to apply it to the threads. Then we can go ahead and slip this bolt through one of the holes in our frame. We're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the other 2 bolt holes down here, as well as the other 3 on the other side. So now if we come underneath the vehicle here, we're going to have a square access hole on either side of the frame. And this is the hole we're going to use to install our nuts, which are welded to this little rod here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to sneak them up through this hole here, and we're going to do as best we can to align them with our bolts and tighten them down. So you're not going to be able to see much, so it's going to be mostly by feel. So we had to bend our wire a little bit better to try to get the face of that nut there sort of flush with this parallel with this frame. And then we were able to get our bolt to spin on. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this up now. We're not going to torque it down. We're going to go ahead and tighten this up. And then once we get that one, we started with the top one because that's going to be the hardest. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for these bottom 2, and then we'll repeat the same process on the other side. So we were able to get our top and our back bolt here with the nut plates inside the frame. We don't quite have enough room for this last nut plate here, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and torque these 2 down, and then we're going to cut those wires to give us more room for our last nut plate. So now that we have all of our nut plates on our bolts here, we went ahead and trimmed the wires off the bottom of them as much as we could. Now we're going to come back with our torque wrench here and torque everything down to the specifications in our manual. Go ahead and torque the rest of these down. We'll repeat this process on the other side as well. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to reinstall our air baffle back onto the vehicle. Before we do that, on our factory studs here, we're going to need to take 3 washers and place them over the stud here. There's 2 studs in total. And that's going to give us a little bit more clearance for our base plate here. So now we're going to come back in here. This is going to go into the factory air intake. And you need to maneuver it around a little bit to get it to go up in there, just like that. Now we can align our studs here and resecure the baffle with our factory nuts here in a 10mm socket. So the next step of our installation here, we want to take one of our safety cables that comes in our kit here. We see on the bottom we're going to have a mounting point for our safety cables. Basically, it doesn't really matter how we attach these as long as we go through the frame here and then back to this connection point to our base plates. So we're just going to go ahead and find a little crevice here. We can come through and then we should be able to secure it here with our little link that comes in the kit. Put one in through there. come back with the other end. You loop that around again. Come back here, and then we'll tighten this down. We'll go ahead and repeat that process on the other side. So before we cut our bumper and put it back on, since we have it off now, we have a little bit more room to work. If you'll be installing any wiring or a breakaway system, anything like that, now would be a good time to go ahead and get all your connections made behind the bumper here. So now we're going to flip our fascia over here. We're going to have it on a protected surface here so we don't scratch it up. But if we take a look inside on the back side here, directly below this sort of foam padding, we're going to see these two little notches here. We're going to have one on each side. We've sort of marked this in yellow for you, but basically we're going to take this little tab out here, this whole section here between these two clips. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't cut too deep and we cut into the front of the fascia, but we've already did this on the other side, so let's go ahead and show you what it'll look like when it's done. So here's pretty much what we're going for. We've cut this entire tab off, this little section here, but we didn't cut too deep to damage the front of the fascia. So we're going to go ahead and match this on the other side. So we went ahead and test fit our fascia here. So in addition to trimming out the bottom sections here, we're going to be hitting on our foam little bumper insert right here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a nice little square corner off each side here. This is super easy to remove. We don't have to cut it while it's actually on the fascia. We'll just depress these clips here, then we can pull out. There should be a couple of them along the outside edges. And now with our bumper cover back in place, we can go ahead and reinstall all of our fasteners in the reverse order that we took them off. Please keep in mind, for this particular model with fog lights, we do have two electrical connections we need to make when putting the bumper back on. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the BlueOx base plate kit here for our 2012 GMC Terrain.